Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on using AI tools to enhance student learning. As a reminder, this is a 40-minute session and it is scheduled to end at 3:10 p.m. Eastern Time. The presenter will take questions at the end of their session, and then the next session after this will be an additional concurrent session block, which begins at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. So I'm now excited to introduce the presenter for your session, Ki Guillen, an adjunct faculty member with the College of Aviation at the Worldwide Campus. So Ki, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I hope you guys can see the screen that I am sharing. And today I'm primarily going to be talking about using AI tools to enhance student learning. So a little bit of background about me before we get started. I'm currently an FAA analyst, as well as an adjunct professor here at Embry-Riddle. I have both manned and unmanned experience, both as an operator and as a maintainer. And I have taught courses on AI, and this is a subject that I am really excited about, especially with ways that we can continue to tie it to education and learning, not only teaching students how to use AI, but using AI ourselves to help us generate a better environment for students and help enhance their learning in different ways. So the definition of AI, before we really get started, I think it's kind of important to define AI a little bit because we hear this term and it has a lot of connotation involved with it, a lot of opinions, both positive and negative. But in a very basic term, software designed to imitate aspects of human intelligence and human behavior is what we're looking at when we talk about AI. According to NASA, artificial intelligence refers to computer systems that can perform complex tasks normally done by human reasoning, decision making, creating, etc. And I also asked AI if it would define itself for me. And it said the simulation of human intelligence processed by machines, especially computer systems, enabling them to perform tasks that typically require human cognitive functions like learning, problem solving, and decision making. So, a lot of what we see with AI, rather than just simply automation, is this kind of drive towards this human reasoning, this human intelligence. How do we mimic that? Couple of things you need to know. It is absolutely here. It is real and it is sticking around. This is not a fad that is just going to disappear. While we're in a phase where we're hearing a lot about it, we're seeing a lot of growth, new companies are popping up every day. This is something that we are going to be continuing with both in academia and professional lives going forward. And your students are absolutely already using it constantly. I was using it during my graduate school days, which were not that far back in time, and students now have so much more access to this tool. It is something readily available. There are different tools online for them to be using, and they're using it both in their academic lives and in their personal lives. This can be incredibly beneficial for them, providing new ways to do certain things, but can also absolutely hinder their learning when not used appropriately. And it can for sure be intimidating as educators to have to deal with this new tool, to understand it, to understand how it can be used, to understand how it should be used. And it can feel like a lot to bite off. But it's also helping us do incredible things, just in general as humans. One of my favorite use cases for AI that I've seen more recently is there is an AI image assessing bot. And what this robot has been doing is looking at millions of images of moles or skin tags on the human body. And what it's able to do is more easily define ones that may or may not be malignant, which is incredible. You can have a doctor who has studied these things and maybe seen thousands of these, so has a good idea. But this tool can absolutely catch things that maybe that human eyes wouldn't catch initially. And that's the kind of thing that AI can do for us. It is a tool, just like any other. It is a tool that we can learn how to use appropriately or inappropriately to help make our lives easier or give us different ways to do certain things that we've already been doing. A little bit of a difference here as well with AI versus automation. While automation can do a lot of things for us regularly, AI is not quite the same thing. It is taking things further. We're working at a higher level. It is not just if-then sequencings, which you get a lot with automation, but rather it's this trying to mimic human intelligence, using things like artificial neural networks to try to simulate the way that humans think. Automation is something you guys are probably using almost every day at this point. Think about things like scheduling announcements in Canvas. That is absolutely automation, right? If it is this time, then post my announcement. Sending automatic replies if you've done an out of office email. Automation is something you're using regularly. Sending a reply if someone emails you to let them know that you're out of office. One of my favorite ones is sending automatic emails with Power Automate. I use this every single day in my professional life, sending emails to certain people at certain times to remind them to do things or to gather their input into certain documents. It's a great way to do things. You guys are using automation constantly, and there are a lot of tools for it. There are also a lot of tools for AI. This is just a chart that I was able to find that gives you a lot of ideas about what AI can be used for different types of things. For example, you have gaming and social AIs, you have voice agents, you have governments and compliance agents that help you understand rules and regulations, medical workflows. These are just a couple of categories and a couple of companies in each of these categories that are creating AI agents, basically, to do these things for you. So where is the value add? And this is something I think is really important to kind of pay attention to is where are we actually adding value by using these things? One of the things that can absolutely help you guys with as educators is reducing the mental load that you guys have. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that later. It can also make things more efficient. It can speed up your workflows. It can assist in some of those menial tasks that you guys have to do continuously and over again. If we can take some of that workload off, it can make our workdays much more efficient. It also helps find ideas you may not have thought of. Sometimes when it comes to assignments, I don't know how to create a new assignment that teaches my students the content that I want it to without having to recycle the same old ideas. Study guide, flashcards, guided notes. Those things are all great, but students have done those hundreds of times. So how do we create new ideas to get engaging content to our students? I can bounce some of these ideas off of things like ChatGPT to help me understand new ways to engage my students to enhance their learning as well. But it's also really important to note that these AI chatbots, and especially these agents that we see pop up a lot, are not creating new things. They are not generating new ideas out of nothing. They have massive databases. They are using information that exists and creating new content based off of those things. It takes those things, puts them together into something new, and gives that to you. But it is not creating something out of nothing. This is not out of nowhere. Some ways that we can utilize AI in our classrooms to help our students, generating content for students. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this in a little bit, but it is one of my favorite ways to use AI in the classroom. So much of my job is creating these PowerPoints, creating my lectures, creating assignments for students, and then going in and grading these assignments for students. And I've had students that do really well with that minimum level of engagement. And I've had students that need a little bit more from me. As someone personally that really struggles with sitting down and just studying, one of my favorite things to do is use my PowerPoints or lectures to create additional study material for students as an optional way for them to get more engagement if they want to. I've done this for myself when I've been going through courses. I will take a study guide or a textbook chapter, put it into something like ChatGPT, and ask it to create questions for me so that as I'm reading, I can answer those questions to make sure that I'm actually retaining this information. Another way that it can help us is for springboarding ideas. And this is a great way it can help your students too. Maybe you've asked your students to write a 500-word essay on something in aviation history they find interesting. And maybe they aren't finding anything interesting. It can help them generate ideas for things that might be unique based on what their personal interests are. I can say something like, hey, ChatGPT, I have to write an essay on this. Can you help me tie this to my interests, which fall into these categories? And it can find ways to connect the things that you are interested in to the content that you're required to produce for a course. Creating outlines is also a really, really great one that I've had students use and that I've allowed them to use in different cases to help them format ways to write a paper. Sometimes that outline can be the hardest part. I am very much the kind of writer that when I'm given the assignment, I will just start writing. I will write and then I'll go back and edit and then I'll write and go back and edit. and create it without an outline. But I've had classes that have required outlines from me, and that's been incredibly hard. So sometimes it's easy to create an outline with something like ChatGPT, asking it to make sure that whatever it is outlining for you follows whatever the specifications of the assignment are to give you a good place to springboard into writing that essay, especially if you have a harder time creating that content in your head before putting it onto paper. This may or may not be an appropriate use depending on you as a professor and what you decide to allow your students to do, but it can absolutely be an aid in students that have a harder time with that content creation piece when it comes to writing an essay. It can also create additional resources for study. I have had ChatGPT create guided notes for my lectures and PowerPoints. I've had it create crossword puzzles, word searches, or games for learning to help engage learning in a bit of a different way, as well as directed it to create study guides. All of these things are possible, and the prompts you use are going to be a big part of how you get these things the way you want them to look. Again, I'll show you a little bit more of that in a little bit. The resources I want to talk to you guys today about specifically are ChatGPT, Grammarly, Scribe, and Copilot. I will also have additional resources and a link at the end, and that link will also have links to all of these resources as well. So one of my favorites, one of the ones I am sure you guys have heard a lot about because it's one that students often use, is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is free, and there are pro versions, but there are lots of tiered versions. There is a version I can use without even logging in. There's a version I can use that's free once I log in, and then there's also pro and paid versions that can do a little bit more. It can also be incredibly open-ended. It is a place to ask questions. It is a place to potentially find resources. It is a place to potentially get answers. The thing about big bots like this is that they also occasionally have a habit of what we call hallucinating, which is where it creates stuff that is just not real or will tell you things that are just completely fabricated. And a lot of times, people believe these things can give them all the answers. They ask it a question, they believe it is the truth. They don't do any due diligence in checking those answers or verifying that the information is correct. And that is where you can run into problems. Bots like this have also hallucinated in creating entirely fake resources. So there is an AI agent that helps students who are researching, and it helps them find academic papers and cite those academic papers. That bot has been in trouble for completely creating nonsense research papers that don't exist and telling students that they are real resources that do exist and that can be used for their paper. So sometimes these things can be a problem, right? It's a tool. It's not perfect. It's something we can use to help us. It's not going to do all the work for us. And you absolutely need to know what you're asking. So I want to share a little video with you guys about a conversation I had with ChatGPT a little bit earlier. And this is a use case that can be incredibly beneficial for your students to use when it maybe comes to the end of their academic career, moving on to something else, working on a resume. I can ask ChatGPT something like, write me some resume points for my job as a student researcher. What I'm not going to do is copy and paste all of these bullet points into my resume. But what I am going to do is look for keywords, look for things that maybe it's giving me a generic version of, but that I have done and can add my specifics into that. And maybe I want to tailor this down a little bit. Maybe I am an aerospace engineering student researcher, and I want to get more ideas that specifically work in my field. So it's going to give me a whole list of potential bullet points, including things that use tools that these students might actually be using. So we're looking at these answers, we're seeing what they use, and we may or may not take certain things from this. One of the things that is really important when it comes to things like this is understanding that a lot of employers are also using AI to analyze resumes at this point. So you're fighting fire with fire here. A lot of these AI tools that employers are using are looking for these keywords. And so this helps us find and utilize some of those keywords in conjunction with our own personal experience to make a resume that might suit what these employers are looking for and really what their AI bots are looking for as they're scanning our resumes. Something that is also important and slightly unrelated is that these bots often need an actual Word document to scan resumes, and PDFs have sometimes had a hard time. It's why when I have students submitting resumes, I always tell them to submit it in a Word document form because those keywords can mean more. And sometimes these bots do not analyze the PDF in the same way, and they can miss out on some of those keyword ticks that these bots are looking for. Here's another example with ChatGPT on a PowerPoint that I created, and I used it to teach students. And this time I wanted to create a way to use guided notes. I asked it to create a study guide, but my goal with this was to create a document that I could give to students so that they could fill out the answers while I was giving this presentation. Instead of creating a guided notes document on my own, taking hours of time to create questions based on my own content, I put that content into ChatGPT and asked it to create a 25-question study guide based off of the materials in my presentation. I uploaded that PowerPoint and it created a 25-question, basically guided notes, right? These are all very open-ended questions based on the content in that PowerPoint. And what I did later on was I copy and pasted it into a separate document, added some spacing for the lines, printed it off, and allowed students to use it if they wanted to during class to help guide their note taking. They were able to see what I was looking for. But it's also super important to read through these things to make sure that they actually are questions that you're looking to have answered. And it'll even put it into a document form for you for printing, which is fantastic. But again, it's a tool. You utilize it to the extent that you feel is necessary or helpful to you, and make sure that it is doing things the way you want it to. The next tool I want to take a second to talk about is Grammarly, or any other writing aid, really. Copilot will do this in Microsoft Word. There are also other writing aids that are out there. The one that I tend to use is Grammarly. One of the things that it's best at is helping you rephrase things. And this can be great as a student when you're trying to communicate a point and you're having a hard time putting it into the correct words. It can give you ideas for that. But also as a professor, when I'm writing assignments, I want to make sure that what I am asking for is clear and concise and that students can understand what I am trying to get from them. This can help me make sure that the language I'm using is clear. One of the things that Grammarly does that I also think is really helpful is it lets you know when language you're using might not be easy to understand for all types of students. So it makes sure that the language you're using is general and easy to read, which is helpful. It can also help you refine assignments, which I already went into. It can help with publications. So if you are going to be publicly producing documents, or even just for simply an email that you're sending out to students, you want it to sound professional, concise, helpful. It can help you make sure that the words you're using and the phrases you're using are what you're actually trying to say. I've also used it to help me grade. When I'm grading 25-page papers, it can be incredibly helpful to be able to just read the document on its own and then also look for things that might be missing after the fact with something like Grammarly. I can see where maybe punctuation is wrong, where students have double spaced, or if they've spelled a word wrong, or if they've spelled a word right, it might sometimes flag it as wrong because it might be a company name. So again, it's important to check these things. I'm not using Grammarly to scan a document that my student wrote and taking every single line that it shows me as something might be wrong as a point off their assignment, but it can direct my eyes to something I might not have seen on my initial read through and save me time in some of the grammar and formatting portions of my grading. Again, it's a tool that you can utilize to the extent that you feel is useful to you, necessary to you, or helpful. There's also a bit of a catch with things like this, though. Sometimes those rephrasing that Grammarly or Copilot can help you do will trigger AI detectors. And this has been less of a problem during my time at Embry-Riddle, but at a previous university I taught at, we had tons and tons and tons of assignments flagged for AI use or academic integrity issues, when really they were only using Grammarly, which was a tool that as the university we were providing to students to use and telling them they should use. So it's really important to be aware of where that problem might come in. Unfortunately, AI detectors are also not quite up to par yet. So sometimes they flag things and they say this was totally written by me when maybe it might have just been rephrased and it was initially the student's idea and they just got some changing in the phrasing to make it more clear. But now the AI is claiming that it wrote that entirely on its own. So there is some concern there and wiggle room there with like what is considered allowed versus not allowed. Different professors allow or don't allow different things, and same with different universities. So it is important to be aware of that. Scribe is one of my absolute favorite AI tools right now. This has been so incredibly helpful to me in both my academic and teaching life, as well as my professional life with the FAA. It has been so helpful. What it does is create detailed instructional guides. So what you do is you go through your process, it records it, and creates instructional guides for it, which is incredibly helpful, especially if you're using maybe niche softwares for your class or something like a flight simulator, and you want to make sure students are setting up the specifications of the aircraft correctly. This will give them step-by-step guides with images. Again, fantastic for both professional and academic life. It is great for, which the example I will show you later, some menial tasks in the more administration side of working in an office. I've had to create so many little guides to just help people do things that to me are intuitive because I grew up in a technology generation. For some of my coworkers, they aren't as intuitive, and I can create these little guides to make their lives so much easier. And it's so helpful with students when I'm so used to using a software because I use it to teach the same course every term. And these students aren't used to it. I can give them a step-by-step guide that makes it a little bit easier. There are free versions and paid versions. I use primarily the free version. I've done the free trial of the paid version and haven't had to use it since. Both have their pros and cons. It's also incredibly easy to edit, which I think is so helpful. The way that it works is you open the application, you hit record on a process, and then you do whatever it is you normally do. You can even do misclicks. If I accidentally click the wrong button, I can go back and click the right button and later on edit that out. So I don't have to start over every single time like I would if I was maybe recording a video of my process. And then you end the recording and you end up with an editable process that looks something like this. This one is fantastic. This was a way that I was teaching people to share their calendar availability in Outlook. And after I went through my process, it created this document for me, which was fantastic. It gives me links that I clicked on. It shows me where I clicked things and gives me word instructions as well as that image that shows me a little button of where the actual click is. Again, super helpful. I can edit all of these instructions. I can delete them if I want to. It was fantastically useful. It still is. Almost every day, somebody in my organization now uses one of my little guides with these images to make things a lot easier for them. Makes my life easier and theirs. And then there are ways to share. You can share the link directly. If you have the pro version, you can export as a PDF. I, instead of exporting as a PDF, went through and took screenshots of every step and put them in a Word document and then created my own PDF. Not the easiest, but it did work as a solution. But there are lots of ways to use these tools. It has been so incredibly helpful for me. And it makes my time a lot easier when students ask me, hey, how do I do this thing? I can send them that document instead of having to walk them through it on their own. If they need that additional help afterwards, I can absolutely still be there for it. But this can help with that efficiency piece, like I was talking about earlier. You have these documents, you have these processes all recorded so that you can share them with your students to make things easier on them, which is huge and very helpful. Copilot is one you guys might already have access to depending on what your Microsoft permissions are, but it is the Microsoft AI. And what it does primarily is use AI to work within the tools that Microsoft already has. It can seamlessly move data between the different apps. So if I want to send something from Word to Excel or from Excel to Word, it can do that a lot easier for me. It can understand and execute simple commands like animate this slide or I need an image for this slide, and it can create that content for you. It can do a lot within the different apps. And one of my favorite ways to use it is within the Power series that Microsoft has. So things like Power Automate. One of the ways that I personally have used Copilot is by asking Power Automate to create a flow. And what this flow does is like an automation flow. And I said, hey, I need a flow that sends an email to these people on the last working day of every month at 2 p.m. that tells them to do this. And for me, that was reminding them to submit their hours for the month. And it generates that flow, sets it up. I can test the automation to make sure it works. And then I have that automated process. Now, I don't have to look at a to-do list every day and send out these emails. Instead, I can have the automation do it for me with the flow that was generated by Microsoft's Copilot AI. There are lots of ways this can be helpful. It'll be helpful within these Microsoft apps. And it is something that a lot of Microsoft teams are now being migrated over to using, which can be helpful. Some decision points to look at when you're deciding on using an AI tool is what information does it take to use it? There are versions of ChatGPT that I do not need to even log in to use. So it's not really taking a lot of information from me. I'm not telling it anything about myself. One of the other AI tools I'll talk to you about later asked me a ton of questions before I could even sign up for an account. So it's collecting a lot of information on me on the front end. So what information does it take from you is important to know, as well as what information is it saving from your usage. A lot of the times when we're using these AI softwares, we are also help training them. So it's using the information that we generate. It's one of the problems that we have with the FAA and using almost any AI system, because a lot of our information is protected and we have to follow government regulations for what we are and aren't allowed to use these systems for. So it's important to be aware of what information it's saving from the way that you use it as well. And obviously the cost. There are lots of free versions of lots of these softwares, and there are absolutely times where that paid version is going to be worth it. Your time is worth something. And if it saves enough of your time, sometimes that cost point is going to be worth it. It's just something to consider. A couple of honorable mentions I want to talk to you guys about. Again, links to these will all be included in the very last slide as well. Is Massive, which uses AI tools to search for and apply for jobs. It is quite literally like a dating app, but for jobs. You look at jobs and you swipe yes or no if you're interested in that job. And after you've answered a bunch of questions, submitted your resume, and given it a lot of information about yourself, it will use its AI bot to apply to these jobs for you. Again, can be incredibly helpful depending on how you want to use it and if you're really interested in using something like that. It is a little bit more expensive though. RemNote is fantastic. It creates student study tools like flashcards to quiz them in real time. This has been incredibly helpful for things like the oral exam studying. I can put all of those questions and answers inside of a study pool, and it will quiz me through those. So instead of memorizing the orders of the questions or just reading it on my own, if I don't have somebody to quiz me, RemNote can do that for me. It can create study tools like flashcards also for other content. So I can upload a PowerPoint, get flashcards, and then if I'm having an extra study day in class with students, we can do it live in the classroom to help study. Mapify is awesome. It creates topic mind maps. So if you want more visual images for the way your topics connect, incredibly useful if you are a visual learner. It can help connect ideas or give you ways to visually observe data, which can be very helpful. Otter AI will take notes based on the audio. One of the ways that I've seen people use this is as professors, I can have Otter recording my lecture as I'm giving it to students. And then afterwards, it will give me notes based on what I said. So instead of having to remember exactly what things students might have asked and I might have answered that weren't necessarily part of my original presentation, I now have all of that recorded, transcribed, and put into whatever format I want it to be in, which can be very helpful. It can give you a full summary. It can give you a short summary. There are lots of ways to use that information, but it takes the lecture that you gave and puts it into a different type of format, which can be helpful to send to students afterwards or to use next semester when you're refreshing on what things might have been important or what you might want to add to your PowerPoint for the upcoming term. Student use of AI. There's a definite limit on how much you should be willing to accept. And that is going to be different for each of you based on what you're teaching, what department you're in, what school you're teaching at. Embry-Riddle has a general AI usage policy. I can add on to that if I want to and allow less. And that's okay. It's your decision how much you are willing to accept from your students. But it's also important to remember that this is a tool that they are going to have access to in their lives. So there's a balance between restricting it for academic integrity purposes and giving them use of a tool that exists for them and will continue to exist for them throughout their lives. The balance is going to be different for everyone. But it is just a tool. And unfortunately, there is only so much you can do to keep them from using it. We are not restricting IP addresses. We are not making them write essays by hand. So there's only so much we can do to keep them from using these tools. I want to show you one of the things that I've done in the past that has actually caught a student using AI when they weren't supposed to. This absolutely will not work for everybody, but I thought it was funny that it worked this time. Was I created something similar to this, asking a student to write an essay. But in my instructions, one of the things you can't necessarily see with the naked eye is that I have asked to include the word substantial at least twice. So if a student were to, let's say, copy and paste my instructions, move over to ChatGPT, and ask it to do the work for it, it will create that essay. However, it uses the text that I added as well. And you can see that up at the top of the screen there where it says include the word substantial twice. So if the student was rereading what they pasted, they would probably notice that that was there. But if they didn't, if it was a student just copy and pasting, which unfortunately I have had students do, it sees those words and it has them in there. And then when I'm grading, I can use Command F, check for the word substantial, and see if it shows up. Like you can see here, it shows me where it might have been popping up. So there's substantially, substantial, and substantial. It's something that I have done in the past. It absolutely is not foolproof. It does not work every time. But unfortunately, it has caught students using AI for me. And then you have to have that really unfortunate discussion about how it will impact their grade and what academic integrity violations there might be. It's also important for us to understand that we are helping teach these students how to use these tools as well. When I was growing up, I had so many teachers tell me that I would never have a calculator in my pocket at all times. Now I have one on my wrist and in my pocket pretty much at all times. It's a tool. And your goal is to find things that help your students. It's going to be different for all of you. What you choose to use, what you choose to allow is going to be different based on what you're teaching, how your teaching style matches up with these tools, and what you decide your department or your school decides is going to be permissible. But it is real. It absolutely exists, and it is being used actively in our lives. This is not something that is going to go away. This is not something that is going to disappear. Unfortunately, this is something we're going to have to learn to live with as professors and educators. It's just unfortunately moving very fast, and that makes it hard to keep up on our side of things. There are also very clearly pros and cons to it existing, right? It can be a tool to help students learn better. It can provide resources and guides to make your job easier. And if your job is easier, you get to be more present with your students when you're actually engaging with them. But it can also lead to the long-term negative effects, such as students not learning to critically think as well because they're always using this tool. Pros and cons, at the end of the day, it is just a tool. It is something that you can use, that you don't have to use, but you have that option for, which can be great. I want to take some time if there are any questions. I also want to let you know that if you want to scan this QR code will have a bunch of information on ChatGPT and prompts that you can use or ways you can use it to help your students. It will have links to every AI tool that I discussed here today and give you access to kind of that side of things so you can see if it's something that you are interested in using. and some other information as well. So if you want to take a look at that, go for it. If there are any questions, I would love to take them if anybody has any.
There is a question in the chat.
Okay.
Do paid services still include your inputs and info in their training database, or do they keep it private?
Yeah, it absolutely depends. And again, this is something that we've dealt with the FAA side of things is we can create separate bubbles in their hardware where the information that we use is training itself, but it's not going outside of our organization. But it's one of the reasons why we have a harder time on the government side with using these tools is we have to have certain agreements in place with these companies. So at the FAA, there is the option to use Grammarly, but you have to get the FAA specific license for Grammarly so that nothing is being sent outside of it. Something like Otter AI is not approved by the FAA because they do not do that yet. They have all of their AI teaching all of their AI. So all of their content is being used across the board and it's not something permissible. So James, in answer to your question, it really depends on the software, depends on the licensing for the software. It'll be different based on what organization you're working with and what company you are working with as well. Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope some of this was helpful. Again, if you want to take a look at that link, it'll give you some great additional resources and show you some ways that you can use these AI tools to make your life easier as well as help your students. It was wonderful to talk with you guys today, and I hope I get to do this again sometime.
Thank you, Ki, so much for sharing this information with us, and thank you to our participants. As she mentioned, the QR code is on this slide. You can also choose the resources link at the bottom of your Zoom room. So we hope to see you at one of our next sessions, which begins at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time, so in about 8 minutes from now. Don't forget to head back to the lobby to access the next session. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.